the if. The if you have at the front of yourself is not if only, but wouldn't it be wonderful if? And you fill in the blank with anything and everything you desire, great or small. Why not do it now? Do it daily. Do it full-heartedly. And watch the universe work its magic. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in to the 91st show in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the muse-worthy coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully. Broadcast 90 was all about pausing, to breathe, to center yourself, to rest or replenish, to fully feel and deeply savor, to simply be, away from the swirl of ceaseless busyness, distraction, away from overindulgence in things that are shallow or hollow and don't enlarge your well-being, and away from the madding crowd. At a time in our world and so many lives when pausing versus taking the risk of not pausing and losing ourselves altogether in mind or heart or spirit as a result. This week, what if? Imagining all kinds of things, from the fanciful to the possible, in your present and about your future, in your waking, dreaming, and daydreaming hours, moments of living, where your realm of inner and outer experience can become, as a result, all the richer, all the more inviting, engaging, and inspiring. I've mused for us into cultural commentary, inquiry, and poetry around this theme, and I'm glad you're here to explore it with me and fellow listeners, feelers, and imaginers all. Thought we'd start with a thought from the great design legend Paul Rand on the role of the imagination. He had these words: "The role of the imagination is to create new meanings and to discover connections that, even if obvious, seem to escape detection. Imagination begins with intuition, not intellect." Thank you, Paul Rand. And from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, his classic, The Little Prince, some of you would know. "It's only with the heart one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." Thank you, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and The Little Prince. Mark Strand, the poet. "Nothing will tell you where you are. Each moment is a place you've never been." And around that, Rob Bresney, in his very latest e-letter, freewillastrology.com, says, "You're always at the beginning. Never underestimate your power as a creator. You're a prophet. Your imagination is the single most important asset you possess. It's your power to create mental pictures of things that don't exist yet and that you want to bring into being. It's the magic wand you use to shape your future. And so in your own way, you are a prophet. You generate countless predictions every day. Your imagination is the source, tirelessly churning out images of what you will be doing later. The featured prophecy of the moment may be as simple as a psychic impression of yourself eating a fudge brownie at lunch, or as monumental as a daydream of some year building your dream home by a lake or sea. Your imagination is a treasure when it spins out scenarios that are aligned with your deepest desires. In fact, it's an indispensable tool in creating the life you want. It's what you use to form images of the conditions you'd like to inhabit and the objects you hope to wield. Nothing manifests on this planet unless it first exists as a mental picture." Thank you, Rob Bresney. Well, If you haven't realized it yet, consider how much else awaits you, is yours for the imagining and yours for the experiencing. This is a poem of mine from Kitchell Pond, Convent Station, New Jersey, a few years back. There's so much more. Sometimes it takes a great love or a great loss, or both, to realize there's so much more to life, to living, than you ever knew or saw before, or ever imagined could even be. But once you experience the contrast, embody any or all of the possibilities, you burningly desire to see, feel, imagine nothing less, can no longer live with less when you know there's so much more there, a far greater place of being here to say yes to. Why not as a start? Start imagining some things, like the sunsets and sunrise maybe, the eclipses, the lightning storms, the northern lights as wild living things. For me, doing that vivifies the days and the natural world we live in even more. This is a poem from the Yucatan from Mexico, 1999. Ave del Paraíso, bird of paradise. As 6 arrives, without a word, the air is infused with pearl-pink molecules. Long clouds form the luminous rose and spun gold plumage of some vast and resplendent bird, an ave del paraíso, the rest of which you can only imagine displaying its marvels below the horizon of the day. Can you imagine being at play up in the clouds, just with your body? I remember often as a child being in that wondering state, wondering what would it be like to do that. And one end of summer on the beach out on the South Fork of Long Island, musing again back in 2018, came this poem, Up in the Clouds. Up in the clouds, it's always sunny or starry, and below and beyond the soft edge of any cloud bank you're resting on or roaming over, there's a sound much like surf, a distant report like breakers on a long, lone beach whose volleys are muffled by seagrassed dunes. From time to time, silver planes pierce through, heading north or west, and pilots tip a wing your way, like tipping a hat. On rare occasions, a rocket races by en route to the moon, or a hot air balloon rises slowly, serendipitously, blue Danubely, usually with men in mustaches and goggles who fuss with ropes and flames inside their floating picnic baskets as they ascend away. Best of all, it's never crowded up here. Never more than a few people watching the sunset or sunrise when all goes pink or zinc, or lounging, reading or daydreaming, and maybe there's an old lab chasing a tennis ball and a gull that points like a trusty weather vane into the wind. Up in the clouds. What if there's a garden growing out in space? Picture that. I did one springtime. There's a garden behind the moon. Lucent, silent, ethereally fragrant, afloat in an untarnished sea of tranquility, aglow with large beds of lunar flowers, whose petals shine and orbit like planets around enchantingly astral pistils and stamens. A garden that grows in starlight, a jardin illuminé. You enter through the swinging gate of your night or daydreams, where you may idle and muse, meditate, and gaze back now and then at the blue-green earth you traveled from, imagined, and back in time, as exotically and spaciously, bloomed from. There's a garden behind the moon. Maybe there is. Let's remember what Pablo Picasso said. Everything you can imagine is real. Everything you can imagine is real. I was remembering as I thought about material for us, Dr. Jean Houston, the founder of the Mystery Schools, and it was from a workshop that I had actually done that she was leading back a few years back, and it was Life Beyond Limits. The art of, this particular part was the art of restoring your life, and I loved that whole notion, and I'll just share a little bit of what she suggested about that. Let's take the possibilities inherent in the quantum world and work with them to restore our lives. To do this, you'll suspend disbelief and imagine very vividly you can enter into the place where your own life story can be repatterned, restored from the age and story that you are living right now. It's your second chance, your regenesis. By now, you've accumulated a good deal of life experience. Chances are you have experienced a full spectrum of lessons, joys, and sorrows, but now wish to consciously enter into the co-creation of an improved, more vital, more creative story for the years to come. So, close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and travel now to that place of quantum possibilities where you can choose the patterns for your life to come. Try out new possibilities on the screen of your mind. Imagine things you want to accomplish, like a new career, richer relationships, travel, or the impact you'd like to make on the world. Choose the possibilities you feel most drawn to. See them in great detail on that inner screen. Feel them, and above all, know them as potential realities that can manifest into the space-time world in which you exist. Do this until you feel the living force of their reality. Know that the quantum field is drawn into your vision and adding elements, coincidences, resources, appropriate people, ideas, and opportunities to help in the realization of your new story. This is where the interdependent co-arising of you and the universe together happens. The more often you do this practice, the faster it will grow to the point where desires that begin in you as merely imaginative possibilities will quickly become actualizing probabilities. So, sharing that with you. Thank you. Thank you, Jean Houston. And what if you left and let go of, as maybe part of this or just beyond that, every unwanted dimension of your life? Liberated yourself, starting today. It's a poem called Parachuting Out. Of all those paradigms flying God knows where. No places I wanted to travel. Once I knew to trust my own senses and presence of mind and heart to jump into the wild blue wonder of another kind of life altogether. To use my own chute, pull my own ripcord, feel free at last to float and find the way, far away from society's critically mass flight path, to my own happy landing. What if you took yourself back in a time machine to someplace, maybe a colorful place, and people that, or persons that caught your fancy? Well, here's someone I'd want to see if I went back in time, inspired by a book that I read about him called Man Flies. The title of this is The Belle Époque Aéronaute. It was written for Alberto Santos Dumont, the real father of aviation, who was a famous balloonist in France back in the day, back in time. Dandy Santos Dumont, flying his yellow silk demoiselle over the summer gold treetops of old postcard France, or steering his beloved little Brazil and its floating red banner over the fashionable hats and houses of Paris, landing on the terrace of a favorite café, then lifting off like a champagne bubble after lunch with his Panama hat, high collar, and elegant mustache. Man Flies is the book. Wonderful little book. Fascinating figure. Or what if you imagined past lives of your own ancestors more deeply or richly, not just factually or dryly? Well, there was a friend of mine out in Kansas, a Kansan, and he told me a story about his grandfather and grandmother, and he was sort of a major man of wheat in the day. And I listened to that story, and I imagined his ancestors for him. They weren't mine, but they were his. And this poem came forth called A Wheat King of Kansas, and he sent me a picture of the two of them, which is this big soup strainer mustache on. And this was written for Paul Weiner and his grandfather and grandmother. A wheat king of Kansas. A wheat king of his day. The place, Florence, Kansas. Gold buckle of America's grain belt. His mustache, a combine unto itself. His right arm, Mary, a Longfellow, long-following, unsuffering wife. Yes, a descendant, maybe ascendant, of Henry Wadsworth himself. A king who lived, threshed, and thrived through decades of heat and dust, of stacking and bundling, windrowing, and watching the willful Great Plains weather. Through constant chuffs of oily steam engines, huffs of hard-worked hands, legions of straw walkers, sewers, collectors, winnowers. To get through the chaff to the 24-carat kernels, the stuff of his dreams, his security, his place in local society, a place of well-earned Midwest propriety. What if you were more exuberant about, ecstatic about celebrating the people you hold dear? This was an example of that. This is from my soul sister, Jane Hewson, on her 60th birthday back a few years back. Planet J, it's called. As Planet Jane makes a 60th swirl around the greater galaxy, I imagine her dream body floating freely over the chalk-white cliffs of Dover, feeling the upswell of their wildness, their innocence, over the lavendered fields of Provence, as they plume forth painterly color, fragrance, Frenchness, over the windswept highlands of Scotland, all gorse, heather, deep imprints of ancestors. I imagine her conversing in plenitude with sacred places of light, places loved, loves and lives found, touched there. Cresting rising mountains, fathomless oceans, ancient forests and fjords. Sunburnt mesas, grand canyons, passing her magnetic pull over other landscapes, from fabled metropolises to quiet country villages. As she travels, as you travel, harmoniously, sonorously, into remarkable new outer and inner reaches. Well, vibrating that out to Jane Hewson tonight. I'll have to let her know that I shared that poem. What if you could poetically envision and express the inner landscape of someone you cherish, especially perhaps a partner or lover? Inside You is a poem I wrote years back. Or such a person. Deep inside you is a luminous blue grotto, sun-swept, wind-swept seas, groves of ocean grasses undulating, meditating in slowest motion, hidden orchards ripe with late summer rays, shadows, succulent fruits, towering cloud banks, brilliant white, brushed with violet, northern lights, fireworks, firelight. Deep inside you are virgin springs, cisterns, cenotes, sources. Clusters of flowers that open, close, perfume, ever bloom. Clusters of stars that shimmer in from unknown constellations. Silk-lined passages, soft-petaled entrances. Rare places to behold, beheld, enfolded. Halls, chambers, corners, a play with mysterious felt melodies, harmonies, delirious rhythms, reveries. Places of deep joinings, end joinings, pourings, purifying, all inside you. And, dear listeners, what if you appreciated with bedazzlement, with astonishment, the workings of your own body, your incredible physiognomy? This is a poem called A 35 Trillion Cell Wonder. It's for every single being alive, which includes you. 35 trillion cell wonder. That's you. All those cells orchestrating with vast intelligence, a galaxy of processes, complexities inside your body, without you thinking. From your breathing to your blood flow, enabling you to laugh, make love, give birth, swim, dream, live every moment. Talk about wonder. What if you could see places like houses that you visit or inhabit or used to inhabit more prismatically, more imaginatively, colorfully, poetically? This is one of others that I've spent much time in, that belongs to a soul sister in Chelsea in New York City. And it was imprinted before her time or during her time by a great and prolific artist named Ben Zion, who collected and created and amazingly for many, many decades. And then the house came to her with all of those things in it, all of those amazing things and energies. It's called the House of Wonder. It's an ode to that place. A layer cake of lifelong creating and collecting. 6 stories filled with curiosities from the world's corners and cultures, and the work of the rampant hands and motive heart of the now absent but felt present artist over half a century later. 6 stories and the confecting of wars, histories, ponderings, and pieces later. Frosted with iron and oil paint, stones and poetry, fabrics and relics. A house of never-ending wonder, hidden so quietly, so stillly amid the rush and thunder of the surrounding city. An undiscovered creation, a kind of prestidigitation floating here, brimming with buried treasures, all waiting to be found. The House of Wonder. Let us muse on dreams and daydreams a bit. Linda Pastan, the poet, her poem Dreams. Dreams are the only afterlife we know, the place where the children we were rock in the arms of the children we have become. There are as many as leaves in their migrations, as birds whose deaths we learn of by the single feather left behind, a clue, a particle of sleep caught in the eye. They are as irretrievable as sand when the sea creeps up, its long knife glittering in its teeth to claim its patrimony. Sometimes my father in knickers and cap waits on that shore, the dream of him, a wound not even mourning can heal. The dog's legs pump in his sleep. Your closed eyelids flicker as the reel unwinds, watcher and watched, archer and bullseye. Last night I dreamed a lover in my arms and woke innocent. The sky was starry to the very rind, his smile still burning there like the tail of a comet that has just blazed by. Thank you, Linda Pastan. I went back to the Jerome Singer's book, The Inner World of Daydreaming, and I found some notes on it in the marginalia on the psychology of how mind-wandering and constructive daydreaming boosts our creativity and social skills. So he was a 1950s Yale psychologist that wrote that book. I'm just going to pull out a few things that I thought were worthwhile for us and interesting to me too. Right from the start, his research produced evidence suggesting that daydreaming, imagination, and fantasy are essential elements of a healthy, satisfying mental life. He noted that daydreaming can reinforce and enhance social skills, offer relief from boredom, provide opportunities for rehearsal and constructive planning, and provide an ongoing source of pleasure. In later work, he describes those who engage in it as quote, happy daydreamers who enjoy fantasy, vivid imagery, and the use of daydreaming for future planning and possess abundant interpersonal curiosity. The Inner World of Daydreaming, Jerome Singer. Pointing you to that, and then also to Alan Lightman's book. I've talked about it once or twice before. I can't get over it. It's a small book, and it's absolutely delightful. It's beyond wildly imaginative, and it's Einstein's dreams. It's his imaginings, fanciful imaginings of what Einstein might have dreamt about, and it was all a lot of to do with aspects of time and relativity, of course, but really colorful and whimsical at times. Well, this particular one was about what if there was no future at all. And in that story, in that part of the book, he says, or the dream, Einstein's dream, he imagined was, in a world without future, each parting of friends is a death. In a world without future, each loneliness is final. In a world without future, each laugh is the last laugh. In a world without future, beyond the present lies nothingness, and people cling to the present as if hanging from a cliff. But that. Thank you, Alan Lightman. What if you could dream in other languages? Or as someone from a very different culture, be that character? Maybe you have already. Maybe you will. I'd love to hear about that if so. Once I had this imagination, dreaming in Chinese. It hasn't happened yet, but I wonder what it would be like to dream in Chinese. Maybe induced by the smoke of lapsang souchong, or the fire of rice wine, mi ju. Would I find myself standing on a corner in old Shanghai singing a song to the moon in Mandarin? Buying a bright-throated bird in the market, maybe a hua mei to stroll with, serenade my mornings. Fishing for mottled carp from a low wooden boat on the Yangtze. Dipping a brush to paint a mountain landscape disappearing into the mist. Dreaming in Chinese. Reveries, daydreams are such beautiful states to fall into, to slip into and innerly sense into. Like, this is one of many of mine. I'm sure you have yours. One of mine is back in Central Park in New York City, where I lived for quite some time. This was one summer, 2013. A midsummer's nightgown. As I dusk dream in the evening breeze, eyes half open to the outstretched water, under high green canopies let silk song with leaves and robin's wings, and cicadas that fade up and out at the edges of my ears, I imagine you appear, moving gently, midsummerly here. Move toward me through the clovered glade in a gown of glowing fireflies, their dreamlight draping your bare shoulders, floating over your long arms, lighting your irises, lamping the widening night around you with a deep enchantment. A midsummer's nightgown. Dreams for our lives, they're so vital, can be so fertile and greatly fuel our way. And Langston Hughes has this short poem, Dreams. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field, frozen with snow. Thank you, Langston Hughes. So important, isn't it, dear listeners, to also encourage our youth, our young ones, to dream, keep dreaming, to keep using their splendid imaginations, to stay full of wonder and wondering. One of the young ones in the day, and back in 2017, was Victoria Dugan. And This was on her 15th birthday, sort of a Dutch uncle for her and her sister Evelyn, I would say. And this is called 15 Years Later. And 15 feet taller, if not in actual size, in highness of feeling, of how much you've grown in the world, in your senses of self and life, of how much more you can see, imagine, and keep growing. Speaking of which, the sky's the limit. That goes to all of you, but also to her. I'll mention that to her, or her dad or mom. She's actually in college right now out in Milwaukee. Wonderful young lady. Ursula Le Guin, the poet and writer, on redeeming the imagination from her book, Words Are My Matter. In America, the imagination is generally looked on as something that might be useful when the TV is out of order. Poetry and plays have no relation to practical politics. Novels are for students, housewives, and other people who don't work. Fantasy is for children and primitive peoples. Literacy is so you can read the operating instructions. I think the imagination is the single most useful tool mankind possesses. It beats the opposable thumb. I can imagine living without my thumbs, but not without my imagination. It's an essential tool of the mind, a fundamental way of thinking, an indispensable means of becoming and remaining human. Children have imagination to start with, as they have body, intellect, the capacity for language, things essential to their humanity, things they need to learn how to use well. Such teaching, training, and practice should begin in infancy and go on throughout life. Young human beings need exercises in imagination as they need exercise in all the basic skills of life, bodily and mental, for growth, for health, for competence, for joy. This need continues as long as the mind is alive. And silence, it can be fertilizing. It can bathe the imagination. It can, as in great open spaces, I think of those plains stretching far below the Hopi mesas in Arizona, be the nimbus of a way of life, a condition of vision. Such living silences are more and more endangered throughout the world by commerce and appropriation. Thank you, Ursula Le Guin. What if you became, or at times allow yourself to be, a seeker, a gatherer of something beautiful like sweetness, or pictured yourself as such a character of such a kind? I did that one November in 2019. This is the honeycomber. Gathers sweetness, faces, feelings, moments, instead of sea glass and shells from the shores and tides of his days. Keeps his feet and eyes bared, his heart unbuttoned, to discover the softness of the world, the in and outflowing wonders, the full honeying sun. The honeycomber. I was thinking of collective imagination and collective consciousness recently, and I was wanting to apply some aspect of it to the sharings and findings here for you and us. And I came across this poem from quite some time back, 20 years ago actually, February of 2002, from the Yucatan, the Mayan coast. When it came to me, collective consciousness. Imagine the eyes and beaks of billions of birds all opening on cue at the first split second of sunup. Yeah, imagine that. Okay, on we go. I wanted to read you Billy Collins' poem, Questions About Angels, but just to keep on our good time, if there's time, I'll bring it back to us, but I'm going to keep going with some other things for us that I already have, that I do want for sure to come to you with. Scott Cairns, Poet New to Me, Possible Answers to Prayer. I felt it related to our theme of what if, what's imaginable, possible, sought for here on a prayerful note. Your petitions, though they continue to bear just the one signature, have been duly recorded. Your anxieties, despite their constant, relatively narrow scope and inadvertent entertainment value, nonetheless serve to bring your person vividly to mind. Your repentance, all but obscured beneath a burgeoning yellow fog of frankly more conspicuous resentment, is sufficient. Your intermittent concern for the sick, the suffering, the needy poor is sometimes recognizable to me, if not to them. Your angers, your zeal, your lip-smackingly righteous indignation toward the many whose habits and sympathies offend you, these must burn away before you'll apprehend how near I am, with what fervor I adore precisely these, the several who rouse your passions. Thank you, Scott Cairns, for that. If you had to close the book, is something I have pondered and feel it's good to ponder, to wonder about, to ask myself about, and ask others about. So I'm going to ask you in this poem, if you had to close the book. If you had to close the book of your life, prepare for an otherworldly fuga mundi. Ready or not, here you go, forevermore. What would the last page, the end note, grace note be? The luminous face or close embrace of a great love? A simple, blissful childhood reverie? The first crisp taste of autumn at the green end of summer? And what table of contents would you expose, to mark out the main chapters, the major chords, depth and breadth between birth and death, of your living and loving, your seeking and discovering? If you knew you had to close the book. Here's the ancient poet Kabir on the time before death. Friend, hope for the guest while you are alive. Jump into experience while you are alive. Think and think while you are alive. What you call salvation belongs to the time before death. If you don't break your ropes while you're alive, do you think ghosts will do it after? The idea that the soul will join with the ecstatic just because the body is rotten, that is all fantasy. What is found now is found then. If you find nothing now, if you make love with the divine now, in the next life you will have the face of satisfied desire. So plunge into the truth, find out who the teacher is, believe in the great sound. Kabir says this, when the guest is being searched for, it is the intensity of the longing for the guest that does all the work. Look at me, and you will see a slave of that intensity. Thank you, Kabir. And here's E.E. Cummings, if up's the world. If up's the word, If up's the word, and a world grows greener, minute by second, and most by more, if death is the loser and life is the winner, and beggars are rich, but misers are poor, let's touch the sky, with a to and a fro, and a here, there, where, and away we go. And even the laziest creature among us, a wisdom no knowledge can kill, is astir. Now dull eyes are keen, and now keen eyes are keener, for young is the year, for young is the year. Let's touch the sky with a great and a gay and a steep, deep rush through amazing day. Thank you, E.E. Cummings. Love that. So how do we go about enlarging, expanding ourselves? How are you going about it, dear listener? And if not yet, why not begin now or soon? Keep expanding. Crazy, isn't it? How easy it is to keep the conception of ourself and others so small, so Lilliputian. How seemingly simple to draw so many borders around our beings and theirs, when who we are and who they are is often so much bigger, so much wider and deeper than we choose to believe or open ourselves, self-limiting selves, to even imagine. So I've made it a personal mission, a cause célèbre, to expand, to keep expanding my awareness, my consciousness, conscientiousness of the endless dimensions, great realms, greater wealth of possibilities that may reside inside this man, that woman, flowering child, a dear friend, lover, passing stranger. Keep expanding. What if you saw life way more ecstatically? Or any parts of it? That brought me to Walt Whitman, and of course many, many poems of him. He's great ecstatic for me. But here's Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, at least the first two parts of it. Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. Flood tide below me, I see you face to face. Clouds of the west, sun there half an hour high, I see you also face to face. Crowds of men and women attired in the usual costumes, how curious you are to me. On the ferry boats the hundreds and hundreds that cross, returning home, are more curious to me than you suppose, and you that shall cross from shore to shore years hence are more to me, and more in my meditations than you might suppose. The impalpable sustenance of me from all things at all hours of the day, the simple, compact, well-joined scheme, myself disintegrated, everyone disintegrated, yet part of the scheme, the similitudes of the past and those of the future, the glories strung like beads on my smallest sights and hearings, on the walk in the street and the passage over the river, the current rushing so swiftly and swimming with me far away, the others that are to follow me, the ties between me and them, the certainty of others, the life, love, sight, hearing of others. Others will enter the gates of the ferry and cross from shore to shore. Others will watch the run of the flood tide. Others will see the shipping of Manhattan north and west, and the heights of Brooklyn to the south and east. Others will see the islands large and small. 50 years hence, others will see them as they cross, the sun half an hour high. 100 years hence, or ever so many 100 years hence, others will see them, will enjoy the sunset, the pouring in of the flood tide, the falling back to the sea of the ebb tide. Thank you, Walt Whitman. What if you were the tree in this poem that I'm about to read you, or the one doing the urging? This is Richard Aldington, World War I poet, called the poplar. Why do you always stand there shivering between the white stream and the road? The people pass through the dust on bicycles, in carts, in motor cars. The wagoners go by at dawn. The lovers walk on the grass path at night. Stir from your roots, walk poplar. You are more beautiful than they are. I know that the white wind loves you, is always kissing you and turning up the white lining of your green petticoat. The sky darts through you like blue rain, and the gray rain drips on your flanks and loves you. And I have seen the moon slip his silver penny into your pocket as you straightened your hair, and the white mist curling and hesitating like a bashful lover about your knees. I know you, poplar. I have watched you since I was 10. But if you had a little real love, a little strength, you would leave your nonchalant, idle lovers and go walking down the white road behind the wagoners. There are beautiful beaches down beyond the hill. Will you always stand there shivering? Like your Richard Aldington. Where does the future begin? Well, here's a thought for us, for you. The future begins the moment you awaken, open your all-seeing eyes. The moment you listen to the callings of your all-knowing heart. The moment you christen and set sail in the vessel of your whole-souled self. The future begins then. What if you could break through any very hard place of being you may be in as we speak? Rainer Maria Rilke, translation by Robert Bly, has this poem. It's possible I am pushing through solid rock in flint-like layers as the ore lies, alone. I am such a long way in, I see no way through and no space. Everything is close to my face, and everything close to my face is stone. I don't have much knowledge yet in grief, so this massive darkness makes me small. You be the master. Make yourself fierce. Break in. Then your great transformating will happen to me, and my great grief cry will happen to you. Thank you, Rilke. What if you knew it was time to move on in some larger way in your life, and you answered that call to that largerness? What new course would you chart? And that came to me in January. I was about to chart a course elsewhere in my life. This is called setting sail toward that very thing. The time and tide have come to set sail, to hoist the mizzenmast of this yearning body and spirit, weigh anchor, and follow the course of my intuition, my inner navigation, north by coast, to New England, to Rhode Island, and there chart a fresh chapter by the sea and its salty music, at the feet of the reflected sun and rhyming waves of clouds, moons, and stars. So I encourage you to set sail actually or imaginatively. And as we come toward the last sharings in my hand, dear listeners, what if this life is a kind of mystery play? There's a poem about that, a wondering about that. What if it's a mystery play? This life. And we must, like Holmes and Hercule, carefully, cleverly follow its clues, however false at first, or faint, or far-fetched. Deduce the meaning hiding inside it all. Uncover the heart of our story, at least enough of the mystery to reveal the particular part we're each here, each meant, cast into the world to play. And maybe so-called magical, quote, magical thinking has its value, has its virtues. Magical thinking. Maybe those who dismiss it so self-certainly out of hand would do well to relent and adopt some of it for themselves. Not passively fantastical or wildly unnatural thinking, but real possibility thinking. The lifting belief that things fortuitous, serendipitous, sometimes rather magical, small m, even miraculous, can happen. Where fortunes that fall can rise, large corners can be turned, all, however dark our heart, can at times come out well, unempirically, without obvious cause and effect. It takes just one life example, and there are countless, to prove this plausibility, to refute all the unbelievability. Magical thinking. Mamine is a David Whyte poem that calls us forth into the larger, the farther, to go beyond and bring back the treasures we might discover there. Mamine, be infinitesimal under that sky, a creature even the sailing hawk misses, a wraith among the rocks where the mist parts slowly. Recall the way mere mortals are overwhelmed by circumstance, how great reputations dissolve with infirmity, and how you, in particular, live a hair's breadth from losing everyone you hold dear. Then look back down the path as if seeing your past, and then south over the hazy blue coast as if present to a wide future. Remember the way you are all possibilities you can see, and how you live best as an appreciator of horizons, whether you reach them or not. Admit that once you have got up from your chair and opened the door, once you've walked out into the clear, clean air toward that edge and taken the path up high beyond the ordinary, you have become the privileged and the pilgrim, the one who will tell this story, and the one coming back from the mountain who helped to make it. Thank you, David White, for that. Love that poem. One more time with Rob Bresney. What if you have the keys, he says. If you have the keys to promising doors that don't exist yet, save those keys. If you know the titles of rousing stories that haven't happened yet, write those titles down. If you've caught glimpses of your best future, but they're confusing because you can't imagine how you'll get to that future, imprint those glimpses on your memory. Thank you, Rob Bresney, again. If you could had a wish that could be granted, what would your most desired wish be? This is a poem from my experiential exhibition Behind the Curtain, The Genie Unbottled. After you uncork him and he appears in a serpentine of white smoke, before he grants you your greatest wishes, take your time in the wishing, in the musing of what you most desire in your life, what your life most desires of you. Then ask away. And last for now, possible futures. From whatever future we chose, are moving toward now. To any one we dreamt of, wished we had chosen to live and love into, or one we may have started to embrace, enter wildly, then left suddenly, fled from, out of fear or faithlessness. Whatever one we're living into now, clock or counterclockwise, happily or sadly, know there are so many possible futures at every turn, each of them with intent and commitment reachable, each choosable, no future unchangeable. Thank you again for pausing to lean in, to imagine in. If you have questions, comments, or kudos, please send me a note. I'd love to hear from you. My email is colin@thepoetorialist.com. If you'd like to say thank you with a donation, that'd be greatly welcome because they help sustain my faithful creating and presenting of these free weekly shows. You can contribute by PayPal or Venmo or directly through my site, thepoetorialist.com, or by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island 02891. If you're a patron who might like to host me for a given time on a given property as a working poet in residence to bring forth a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to you, reach out and we'll discuss the opportunities. I also welcome invitations to be a virtual poet in residence, a poetic presence for an online community. And I seek fellow artists all the time to collaborate with on projects musical to theatrical, and projects including narrating events and productions of all kinds. Meanwhile, you can hear my broadcasts online, on YouTube, all up on the Floating Poetry playlist, and if you haven't subscribed yet to that channel, feel free. It's very easy to do. I hope you'll lean in soon again. Until then, dear listeners, here's to engaging, freely and fully exercising and enjoying your imagination, letting it enliven and enlarge you, appreciating the gift of having one at all, and regularly what-ifing as you go through your days, remembering that what's purely delightful just to muse on, or what's possible to achieve, begins with conceiving it and dreaming it into form. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.